Our next guest to talk about the economy is someone who knows a thing or two about the economy, Kip Eideberg. He is the Association of Equipment Manufacturers Senior Vice President. Kip, how are you?
Doing well, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show.
So you have a new survey on the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy. Well, today the economy looks to be doing pretty well if you look at the market. What did your survey find?
Well, I certainly hope that today's news is a sign of good things to come. But as our survey indicates, Kevin, equipment manufacturers continue to face decreased demand, stressed supply chains, and unfortunately the industry has a long and uncertain road back to normal. And let me give you a quick example, if I may, from our survey. For those equipment manufacturers who have furloughed employees, nearly a third said they would not bring them back to work. And for those who laid off workers, 8 out of 10, that's 80%, said they will not rehire them based on current market conditions. So while we have seen some improvement since our last survey, the picture is still pretty grim for the industry, Kevin.
What are the sectors that are going to be hardest hit?
Well, if you look at our industry on the construction and mining side, we tend to see a slightly more negative impact than on the agriculture side. Obviously, part of that has to do with the fact that, farmers are out there planting. They need to plant so they can harvest, so we can put food on the table. So by and large, those manufacturers who make agriculture equipment have done slightly better than construction and mining so far this year.
What about in terms of any bright spots? Any bright spots or anything for optimism that the survey found?
Well, I think there's one spot of optimism, and I think there's one opportunity. So obviously on the optimism front, our industry was designated as essential early on, which kept manufacturers open and on the top. Obviously, health and well-being of 2.8 million men and women of our industry has always been the number one priority and continues to be. But the fact that we have stayed open, I think, has put us in a position, ahead of certain other industries that have been harder hit in terms of having to shut down. And in terms of obviously, the one thing that continues to be a drag for our industry is lack of demand for new equipment. I think that's where the federal government has an opportunity, both in terms of passing a federal infrastructure bill, and today there's a key vote in the House of Representatives. But also, I got to tell you, Kevin, there's a revenue crisis at the state and local level, as much as a $500 billion shortfall. More than 700 cities have stopped critical infrastructure projects. So if the federal government can step in and bridge that gap, I think we'll see demand for new equipment start to rise, and we'll allow equipment manufacturers to bring some of those furloughed and laid-off workers back.
Kip Eideberg's on the line. He's the Association of Equipment Manufacturers Senior Vice President. They've got this new survey out that really talks about manufacturers and equipment manufacturers and how they're handling this. You talk about the supply chain, and I want to keep this thread throughout the show today on the importance of protecting the supply chain, because when I talk to Keith Crock at the State Department, the domestic supply chain and the international supply chain, obviously, but the domestic supply chain here in the United States also needs to be better protected. So when I was reviewing for the show and I was looking at this survey, one of the biggest issues facing equipment manufacturers as they reopen their facilities is continued supply chain issues. What are some of those issues? And does it include protecting it not just from the coronavirus, COVID-19, but also from a national security perspective?
Yeah, it does, and it's a great question, Kevin. So I think it's two things here, right? Number one, you're absolutely right about how critical supply chains are. And in fact, one of the concerns of our industry right now is obviously we worry about some of the equipment manufacturers, the OEM, not being around come the fall as a result of the economic downturn. But even more troublesome is that a lot of the suppliers, many of them small, medium-sized domestic suppliers, are not going to be around. That's where we're seeing a lot of the pain right now. And if they are not around when the economy comes back, Kevin, and when demand comes back, well, those equipment manufacturers are not going to have the parts and components they need to start churning out equipment. So shoring up the supply chain is critical from that point of view. But to your question about shoring up the supply chain overall as a point of national security, look, equipment manufacturers, it's a global industry, and we have supply chains our members do that stretch across the world, and certainly today with the USMCA coming into force, it's a good reminder of the interconnectedness of the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So that's good news. But obviously, having local suppliers is also critical. And so I think what we need to do is we need to make sure that they can be competitive moving forward and that they can stay in business. And I think that's both immediate short-term support from the federal government in terms of the Paycheck Protection Program and the Main Street Lending Program, but also making sure that, we got to protect them against a increasingly global environment, right?
Right.
So
and Kip,
yeah.
Kip, I gotta ask you this because you mentioned it. Kip Eidenberg, he's on the line. He's an SVP. He's an SVP at AEM, but not to get too much in the alphabet soup. Kip's the Association of Equipment Manufacturers Senior Vice President. So they rep all the equipment manufacturers. You mentioned something that you're hopeful for, that you want. And I got to be honest, I don't know if it's going to happen in the fall, but everybody's talking about it, the next round of economic stimulus. And now you've got Boris Johnson over in the UK passing some, infrastructure, the I word, infrastructure to provide some economic stimulus. And here's a conservative global world leader who is quite controversial even in his own country, whether you love him or loathe him. But I'm curious, is that the potential roadmap, Kip, for President Trump ahead of November 3rd, forget the election for a second, to get infrastructure done come the fall?
Absolutely, Kevin, 100%.
You got 30 seconds.
The best way to get the economy roaring again is to help shore up manufacturing in the U.S. And the best way to do that is to invest in our infrastructure. Let's rebuild our roads and bridges. Let's put American back to work, and let's strengthen our economy. That's the way to do it.
All right. We're going to leave it there. Kip Eidenberg, Association of Equipment Manufacturers Senior Vice President, talking all things on their new survey and, of course, on infrastructure.